Day 2 of the 2026 Bahrain Test may have ended with Mercedes at the top of the timesheets, but if we are talking about the most aggressive technical direction on display, the focus shifts firmly to Ferrari, not because of Lewis Hamilton's headline lap time, but because of what the team unveiled at the rear of the SF26. When straight mode was activated, Ferrari's rear wing did not simply open in the manner of the old DRS. The two rear flaps rotated through approximately 180 to 225 degrees. Early telemetry indicated a gain of between 8 and 10 kilometers per hour. In isolation, that sounds impressive. In the context of the 2026 regulations, with their near 50-50 split between electric and combustion power, it becomes strategically significant. Ferrari have been clear that outright top speed is not the primary objective. The emphasis is on energy saving and aerodynamic efficiency. That suggests this is not a short-run qualifying trick, but a solution aimed at sustained race performance. Crucially, the internal packaging required to enable this concept makes it far from straightforward for rivals to replicate quickly. Hamilton, meanwhile, appears more connected to this car than he did last season. If the 2026 regulations genuinely suit his braking style more naturally, and Ferrari have already unlocked a more efficient aero platform, the combination could be potent. So the question is this: have Ferrari already moved one step ahead in interpreting the demands of this new era? And if they have, how much of an advantage could that represent from Melbourne onwards? If you want to understand the technical implications in full, make sure you're subscribed as we break it down. Because on pure lap time, this was not Ferrari's day. Kimi Antonelli set a 1 minute 32.803 seconds for Mercedes, the quickest lap of the test so far, narrowly ahead of Oscar Piastri. Max Verstappen remained within striking distance. The headline narrative, if you looked only at the timing screens, belonged elsewhere. Lewis Hamilton's own best effort, a 1 minute 33.689 seconds on C3 tyres, left him some way off the ultimate benchmark, and his morning running had been restricted to just 5 laps due to an unspecified issue. Yet testing is rarely about the headline lap alone. Ferrari's program was interrupted, but what it revealed in those limited windows carried far greater long-term relevance. When Hamilton engaged straight mode, the rear wing did something no other team has yet shown. Rather than simply increasing the slot gap between the elements, the flap assembly continued rotating until it effectively inverted. Gary Anderson, after more than half a century in Formula One, admitted he had to reassess what he thought possible. "The last time I saw an F1 rear wing upside down," he wrote, "so was the rest of the car connected to it." Technically, the concept is bold. In corner mode, the rear wing operates conventionally, generating downforce in line with expected levels. In straight mode, however, Anderson's quick simulation suggested a roughly 75% drop in rear wing downforce and a dramatic shift in the downforce to drag ratio from around 4 to 1 in corner configuration to approximately 1 to 1 when opened. That is a substantial aerodynamic reset in a fraction of a second. The regulations require the mechanism to complete its transition within 400 milliseconds. At typical end-of-straight speeds, that window covers a significant portion of braking distance. Anderson pointed out that during the closing phase, the assembly could momentarily increase frontal area and drag, effectively acting like a parachute. That reduces the workload on the braking system, something particularly relevant given the energy management pressures of 2026. And that is the critical context. With power units now operating at a near 50-50 split between electric and combustion output, teams face a fundamentally different efficiency equation. Straight-line speed cannot come at the cost of depleting energy reserves too aggressively. Ferrari's own indication is that the objective is not simply to gain 8 to 10 kilometers per hour, as early telemetry suggested, but to save significant energy over a lap. In a race scenario that could translate into greater deployment flexibility, improved defensive capability, or more consistent pace over a stint. The design is not an isolated trick. It is tied into a broader rethink of the rear architecture. Ferrari introduced a striking new diffuser concept earlier in the test, incorporating a central flap and extensions designed to divert hot exhaust gases upwards. The team required FIA approval for the exhaust flap, and the entire rear packaging had to be configured to comply with a 60mm limit behind the rear axle. That meant placing the differential as far rearward as possible within the gearbox design. Craig Scarborough observed that Ferrari had clearly moved elements such as the drive shaft rearwards to create the necessary bodywork zone around the diffuser and exhaust. The implication is obvious. This is not something that can be bolted on by rivals without fundamental internal redesign. As Scarborough noted, teams running their own gearboxes would encounter immediate roadblocks in attempting to replicate the concept quickly. Ruth Buscombe, speaking on the World feed, described the diffuser as a really clever concept, with a connected outwash at the rear. She also suggested it may address issues Hamilton experienced under braking during the ground effect era. Lewis said it was great. He was saying he was enjoying the car, she added, noting that team principal Fred Vasseur had been unusually upbeat and had highlighted that correlation between simulation and track data was good. That point about correlation matters. Ferrari's 2025 season ended in 4th place in the constructors' standings with 398 points, a year that failed to meet expectations following Hamilton's high-profile arrival. Hamilton himself finished 6th in the Drivers' Championship with 156 points and no wins. The relationship with race engineer Riccardo Adami proved awkward, and Ferrari have since confirmed Adami will not continue in that role, although a permanent replacement has yet to be announced. Hamilton has acknowledged he will begin the season without a fixed long-term race engineer solution in place. Against that backdrop, stability and technical direction becomes even more important. Hamilton has spoken openly about feeling in a better place over the winter, having left everything of last year behind. He emphasized that this car is different from the one he inherited previously. This is a car that I've been able to be a part of developing on the simulator for the last, 10 months, 8 months, he said. A bit of my DNA is within it, so I'm more connected to this one for sure. That sense of ownership is reinforced by what observers have seen trackside. Anthony Davidson remarked that Hamilton looked at home in the car during Wednesday's running, referencing the body language of both driver and machine. That may sound intangible, but in a regulatory reset year, confidence and instinctive trust can unlock lap time as effectively as raw aerodynamic load. There were also small but telling moments during race start simulations at the end of sessions. In 2 separate practice launches, Hamilton appeared to achieve the cleanest getaway, while others, including Lando Norris, struggled for traction. It is not definitive evidence of superiority, but it reinforces the impression that Ferrari's integration of power unit, aero and control systems is functioning cohesively. Of course, the broader competitive picture remains tight. Mercedes completed 156 laps, McLaren 158, and both showed consistency alongside outright pace. Verstappen logged 137 tours and remained firmly in contention. Ferrari's disrupted morning limited total mileage, and Hamilton ran wide at turn 10 and again at the final corner on separate attempts. This was not a flawless day, but testing form must be interpreted carefully. The question is not simply who topped the timesheets on one afternoon. It is who appears to have understood the regulatory intent most clearly. Ferrari's rear wing is not just visually dramatic, it addresses the central tension of 2026 regulations, balancing drag reduction, energy deployment, and braking stability within strict mechanical and packaging constraints. The comparison with rival solutions is instructive. Most teams have opted for an evolution of the DRS-style actuator, increasing slot gap in straight mode. Alpine has dropped its flaps downwards to reduce frontal area. Audi has chosen an intermediate pivot concept. Ferrari alone has embraced a full rotational approach that effectively reorients the flap assembly entirely. Anderson suggested that while Alpine's configuration might yield an efficient balance in some scenarios, none has matched the sheer boldness of Ferrari's execution. The trade-offs are complex, but Ferrari's willingness to pursue a structurally integrated solution indicates confidence in their underlying aerodynamic platform. Which brings us back to Hamilton. For 4 seasons in the ground effect era, he struggled to adapt to cars that demanded very early braking to maintain stability. The 2026 rules cycle, more akin in philosophy to pre-2022 concepts, may naturally align better with his style. Buscombe even referenced comments that the regulations look a little Hamilton-y in terms of braking characteristics. If Ferrari's rotating wing genuinely reduces brake load during transition and enhances efficiency at high speed, it could remove one of the weaknesses that undermined Hamilton's previous campaigns. Combined with his deeper involvement in development and the apparent improvement in correlation, this begins to look less like experimentation and more like strategic alignment. The remaining uncertainty is competitive response. Other teams will already be running CFD simulations and wind tunnel comparisons, but without equivalent internal packaging, replication may not be immediate. Australia is only weeks away. There is limited time for structural redesign, so the emphasis shifts from spectacle to execution. Can Ferrari translate this concept into consistent race day advantage? Can Hamilton capitalize on a car he feels genuinely connected to? And will the energy savings they prioritize over headline top speed prove decisive when deployment margins tighten late in a Grand Prix? Because if this is not simply a clever testing flourish, but the foundation of Ferrari's 2026 philosophy, then Day 2 in Bahrain may come to be seen as a turning point, not because of the fastest lap, but because of the clearest signal of intent. So, what do you think? Have Ferrari genuinely cracked the code of this new era? Or is this an early season innovation that rivals will neutralize before the championship narrative takes shape? Let me know your view in the comments below.